in the news in recent weeks and on this program in recent weeks has been the story of the Supreme Court and reproductive rights, and specifically the targeting of reproductive rights clinics and abortion providers around the country, and especially in the Deep South, making it difficult for those clinics to stay open. Joining us now is Dawn Porter, who is the director of a new film on this very topic. Dawn, I believe, is an attorney. She is also the director of Rise, The Promise of My Brother's Keeper, and of a film entitled Gideon's Army, which won a number of prizes for its portrayal of public defenders. Dawn, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, your new film is entitled Trapped, and it explores the plight of women seeking abortion services in the Deep South. First of all, I guess tell us where that title comes from.
So the title is kind of a play on words two times. One is the trapped laws are referred to targeted regulation of abortion providers. And there's that acronym has been coined by the pro-choice side because there are just so many laws that are regulating abortion providers, laws that have been passed over the past, in particular, over the past 6 years. But it also refers to the fact that women are literally caught kind of in this political quagmire as politicians who will never meet them, who know nothing about their lives, make it incredibly difficult for them to make choices about their own future.
You know, I know a film director makes thousands of choices every day in putting a film together. And one of the choices you made, and it may sound superficial, but I think it's important, the logo for your film shows a woman's body, essentially, the way I read it, being invaded by a Capitol dome, a state capitol. And I think the message that told me, and that the film itself sent to me, was one of invasion of basically primarily men in positions of power invading and attempting to control women's bodies. Am I reading too much into it, or is that in fact the message of the film?
No, you can read more. We were working with there's a whole, you're right, there's thousands of decisions in making a film. And one of them is we wanted to send a really strong message. We are in a very crowded media landscape, but also in, a really busy political year. And we wanted to make sure that we got some attention. So we hired a poster designer who came back with a number of concepts. And when that one came, I'll tell you, when that one came across, into my email, and I opened it first on my phone, and I thought, we can't do that. It was like, You know what? Yeah, we can. And yeah, we should. So I love that poster. And I'll tell you, originally the Capitol was a little lower, and we were like, let's put it up a little bit higher.
Probably a good call.
But I'm glad that you are pointing that out. I'm incredibly proud of that. And that is, sometimes the poster is the first thing people see, and that is definitely the message I wanted to send.
Great. Well, good. I think it's a message that needs to be heard. It needs to be sent. So we're talking with Dawn Porter, who's the director of the new film Trapped. And speaking of the first thing people see, the film opens with, I should let people know, too, that while it's a documentary and while it has a political message to it, it is by no means dull. It is very gripping watching, actually. And it begins with... well, you can tell us better than I can, but it basically begins with a clinic, the staff at a clinic coping with the fact that they can't see patients right now and trying to find other places where they can go, places that may be hours away, places that don't have the capacity for them, and so on. So you actually see the deserted facility. And the impact it's having on people's lives, both the clinic employees and the women who use them. I don't think people realize, Dawn Porter, the extent to which when a clinic is forced to close, women may have no other options, or the option might be a drive of many hours, right?
Yeah, so I originally came upon this story. I was filming Spies of Mississippi, a film I did for PBS. in Jackson, Mississippi, and I read that there was only one clinic in the entire state of Mississippi. And as a person who does kind of films and covers political topics for a living, I was so shocked that I didn't know that. And so, as over the 2.5 years that I was working filming with the clinics, that is not an unusual situation. There's 90% of American counties have no abortion facility, so people are driving some distance. But as clinics have closed, that distance has gotten greater and greater and greater. So we opened the film with that closed clinic, and that clinic actually was closed for 7 months. It is the only clinic in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, home of the University of Alabama. It is the clinic that serves more than 50% of the women of Alabama. So its closure created a huge crush of people trying to find other places to go. And you saw, that we just were filming one morning, and that was 2 weeks. That was actually a month after the clinic had been closed. And you see all the calls that were still coming into the clinic and having to try and figure out how to send women someplace. Abortion is measured in weeks. And if you don't find out that you're expecting early on, it's literally a race against the clock. And as these clinics close and the access to abortion decreases, we see people getting incredibly desperate. And that's certainly the case in clinics where we filmed, particularly in Texas and other places.
One of the things that really infuriates me, Dawn Porter, and I can imagine how you feel as well. But one of the things that infuriates me is that the same politicians who are making it impossible especially for poorer women, to obtain an abortion are the same ones who are making it impossible for those women to feed their babies once they're born by cutting back or attempting to cut back on aid programs and so on. So to me, this is an enormous I've always said conservative is someone who believes in a child's right to life from the moment of conception to the moment it's born poor. And I guess I don't know if you feel the same way, but I feel that this is just the most gross, besides the invasion of a woman's right to choose, it seems like the grossest form of hypocrisy. Did you ever get so mad that it was just kind of hard to keep doing what you're doing?
Um, it wasn't hard to keep going, but I would say I did get incredibly angry. I mean, I watched women selling possessions to, try and figure out how to have an abortion. I watched people, try and help them find the last 50 or $100. I watched one woman who she had a 2-year-old. She was married. She had just gotten off of welfare. She had just gotten a job she was really excited about, and she had an unplanned pregnancy after her birth control failed. And she, told me, she didn't want to be filmed, but she told me, I desperately want this baby. I want a second child. I can't feed the child I have.
Mm.
And so she had worked so hard to get herself into a place to put her family in a better economic position. And as she's walking into the clinic, which took her 3 weeks to get an appointment, that was heartbreaking for her. People are screaming at her that she's a baby killer and she's a slut and a whore. And just watching her and all of the women that we saw and the clinic owners day in and day out, kind of subject to the unwanted and unwarranted abuse by people who have, it's none of their business. I don't know their personal circumstances, and they certainly don't know the personal circumstances of all of the women. I think one of the reasons why I wanted to frame the film in terms of its political consequences is exactly what you're speaking to, which is these laws are not happening in a vacuum. There is certainly a concerted effort. The same states that reject Medicaid assistance from the federal government,
Right.
reject the Affordable Care Act, don't provide sex education, don't provide welfare benefits, and also have horrible educational opportunities for poor people, are also the places that are closing clinics. So it does make you incredibly angry, particularly when you see the misinformation as well as the hypocrisy that's being disseminated in the name of the state.
Yeah, and by the way, we're talking once again with Dawn Porter, who is the director of the new film Trapped. Let's talk about that TRAP for a second, Dawn. That targeted regulation against providers. We're talking about things, as I understand it. You're an attorney. You made the film, but as I understand it, we're talking about things like even though these clinics are meant for walk-in services and so on, needing 8 feet or whatever it is of access space, ordering them to rebuild their hallways or whatever so that they're big enough for gurneys they will never use, or other needless architectural changes that really makes them impossible to stay in business, right? Isn't that what the trap is all about?
That's exactly what it's about. TRAP refers to a collection of laws, but they all have the same purpose. So, not only do you have to have your hallways, you have to retrofit your facility so that it can accommodate a gurney. It has to accommodate a side-by-side gurney, which would be appropriate for an emergency room hospital. It is not appropriate for an abortion clinic. It's not necessary. Abortion is one of the safest outpatient medical services. A recent study in California found less than 2% complications after studying 63,000 abortions. Less than 1% required hospitalization transfer. So the regulations are incredibly expensive. In Texas, which is the case that's currently pending before the Supreme Court, a challenge to those regulations is pending. In Texas, the estimation by Whole Women's Health, which runs abortion clinics, is it would cost about $1.5 million to retrofit each clinic. The consequences are real. Texas had, before the Texas clinic closure law, Texas had 40 abortion clinics. After the law, there were 19. And then if the law is upheld by the Supreme Court, there will be 9 clinics in the state of Texas, the state with the second largest population of women of reproductive age. We've already started to see really dire health effects. There's a study, an on-the-ground study performed by people studying reproductive access, estimates that between 100,000 and 240,000 women of Texas, just Texas alone, have tried to self-abort since the Texas law has been in place. So rather than helping women's health, the laws are, one of the single largest drivers of the anti-health care laws.
It's a return to the bad old days of the 1950s and 1960s in that sense, and that is tragic. I guess let's end. We've got about a minute left. Let's end on a more positive note, Dawn Porter. There are some inspirational figures in your film, some people who are fighting on against incredible odds, and just briefly tell us about one or two of them, if you would.
I started this film. I think really good films are about people. I met Dr. Willie Parker, who's an African American physician, grew up in Alabama, first in his family to go to college. He didn't perform abortions for the first 12 years of his practice because of his religious beliefs. He's a very, very religious man. And then he saw women dying from inadequate health care, a lot of Black and brown women, poor women in particular. And he said, I think Jesus wants me to provide health care. And he flies from his home around to clinics in the South providing abortions, at great personal risk, at financial risk, at physical bodily risk. And he is exactly the kind of physician, that's the kind of medical care that you would want. And yet every single hospital, he's got a postdoc from Harvard. He has been credentialed at Northwestern. He was the former medical director for Planned Parenthood. Every hospital in the state of, in Mississippi, in the area near the clinic, denied him hospital admitting privileges. So it's clearly a political fight, but there are people who are so resilient and strong and are living their principles, and that's what you see in the film.
Well, and I encourage people to see the film. The film is Trapped. The director is Dawn Porter. Dawn, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.